Welcome to Champions of Rural America, where we dig into the legislation and federal government actions that uniquely impact rural communities like yours. I'm Christina Loren. We're glad you're with us. Comprised of 105 lawmakers, the Western Caucus stands as Capitol Hill's most extensive congressional delegation dedicated to rural issues. Now, this group of select representatives and senators understand that small communities are the bedrock of the country, and the role they play in our economy is indispensable. We begin tonight with a congratulations to the newly elected Speaker of the House, Congressman Mike Johnson of Louisiana. Now, he's a constitutional law attorney who's devoted his career to defending our fundamental freedoms. In a statement, Congressional Western Caucus Chair Dan Newhouse reacted, saying, "I would like to congratulate Mike Johnson on his election as Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. As a member of the Western Caucus, our new Speaker knows the importance of reestablishing American energy independence, passing a farm bill to support our farmers, ranchers, and foresters, and ensuring the multiple use of our federal lands is upheld. I look forward to working with Speaker Johnson to ensure the voice of rural America remains strong in the halls of Congress." Farm groups are breathing a sigh of relief now that a speaker is in place, putting the saga to rest and allowing work to resume in the nation's capital. And that means we're one step closer to hammering out a comprehensive farm bill. I recently had a chance to visit Washington, D.C. to get a realistic timeline for the passage of the 2023 Farm Bill, where ag lawmakers are excited to get back to work on the massive legislation.
And we want to put farm back in the Farm Bill. Right now, only about 5% of a farm bill goes to the farmer, and it's very clear to me the top priorities for farmers and ranchers is crop insurance, and crop insurance. And I would also talk about the Title I funding. The ARC and PLC are very important, that as we've seen commodity prices go up, the reference prices have not changed either. So those would be my two priorities.
You had a chance to work on the last Farm Bill. After seeing it play out over the last 5 years, is there anything that you feel like we could have done better?
No, I actually think we did a good job. And looking back at 2018, it didn't seem like it was very stable back then, but it was very stable compared to the world of today, with the high inflation that we're seeing now and the uncertainty with the world, which affects commodity prices. The list goes on and on. The other problem that we've had over the last 5 years, really over the last several years, but we're continuing to experience it, is the loss of population in rural America. 53% of our counties lost population. So they're just kind of digging themselves in a deeper hole in a sense. You lose population, you lose the turnback dollars from the state and federal government. You don't have a whole lot to begin with. It just makes it that much harder.
What it requires here is a strong bipartisan effort, and we have that, I think. I think we had bipartisan participation in these hearings in the field. I don't see any headwinds as far as what we need to do in committee. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here or do anything tremendously outrageous. We want a farm bill that builds on the past but also looks towards the future with some of the concerns on conservation that we need to continue to modify. It'd be sure nice to get it out before we break for Christmas and get the Senate to do their work. I hope they just pass the House version and make it easy,
And in order to ensure that farmers are fairly represented in this legislation, House Ag Committee Chair G.T. Thompson is giving farmers a seat at the table.
Well, Christina, it's been a work of love for the number one industry in this country, which is agriculture. It's what a privilege to be able to lead on behalf of those hardworking families that provide us food and fiber and building materials, energy resources. My commitment is that we make this farm bill the one that just doesn't serve from 2023 to 2028, 5-year authorization, but this becomes a platform for the future, whatever's over the horizon. Now, Christine, I describe it as being that this farm bill actually, most recently I've been using the word tripartisan, right? So it's not just Republicans and Democrats, it's the people of American agriculture. That's the tripartisanship. And having them, learning from them what their needs are, what are their priorities, because their priorities need to be the priorities that we incorporate into this farm bill.
Do you think that you do have a bipartisan bill in your hands as it stands right now that will get signed off once you're able to actually get some floor time?
Yeah, I think so. The proof will be in the pudding, right? When we bring this to committee. But, the way you make something bipartisan is bringing everybody to the table early on. Probably the person that's most disappointed we didn't get it done by September 30th is me. And it's not that we couldn't be ready, it's just that we were waiting on Congressional Budget Office, we were waiting on USDA for technical assistance, and quite frankly, we're waiting on the Senate. The Senate has its own time schedule of how it likes to approach things. The September 30th expiration date actually was a technical one. The one that really makes all the difference is January 1st of 2024. If we don't have this done by then, and if there's no extension, we will revert back to Dust Bowl era language for the programs, and that will hurt every American farm family and every American family actually all across this country. And so that really is the drop deadline. Some are really comfortable with an extension, and we'll do that if we need to. I am not. I think we need to do our jobs. We are building I think a highly effective farm bill.
The first title in the farm bill is commodities, and so we feel like we've got a real handle on that. The second title is conservation, and in reality, the 2018 Farm Bill was very well done. There may be some tweaking that we need to do.
As this farm bill continues to climb the ranks, do you think that the farmer's voice is elevated enough right now for good decisions to be made by some of your colleagues who are from the coastal areas who don't understand agriculture? How hard of a challenge is it going to be to get them to understand some of the needs of rural Americans?
Excellent question. I mean, and I've been in agriculture all my life, and I really enjoy that industry. In that situation, they may not grasp the significance of agriculture, production agriculture, research in agriculture, agribusiness. You have to really want to understand it. So it's important to me that we do food production in the right way, and that we have quality products. And then when you take that around the world on exports, it even becomes an increasingly important factor, because people around the world realize that American agriculture can produce quality products. That's important to producers because they take great pride in what they produce, and they want it to be perceived as a quality product.
I think it's well known around the world that American beef is the best quality beef that you can get.
Where's the beef? Can't beat it.
Right here.
Can't beat it, you bet.
Now, until there's an actual bill on the floor, lawmakers tell me listening sessions will continue across the country. Ag Committee Chair G.T. Thompson wants to be able to take the voices of farmers into account right up until the last minute, part of that tripartisan relationship he told us about. Next, on Champions of Rural America, clearing the waters, why WOTUS may face new legal challenges as congressional leaders of the Western Caucus seek additional certainty on the rule. Plus, the Endangered Species Act is stirring up more frustration for private landowners with new restrictions looming in parts of the country. We'll bring you the latest right after this. Welcome back to Champions of Rural America. I'm Christina Loren. Rural Americans are deeply familiar with the uncertainty that WOTUS brings to agricultural operations. For over 50 years, farmers have clashed with the Waters of the United States regulations, forcing them to seek clarity on overly broad definitions that can increase compliance costs, slow production, and create hours of unnecessary paperwork for farmers and ranchers. And it's often still unclear if they're actually in violation of any laws or not. We had a chance to catch up with Representative David Rouser of North Carolina to discuss the latest changes to the rule and what's next for WOTUS. Earlier this year, the ag community received a highly favorable, unanimous decision from the Supreme Court in the case Sackett versus EPA, leading to a more narrow definition of WOTUS. But a number of lawmakers say the new WOTUS rule is still unfair to farmers.
You have individuals who were trying to produce America's food and fiber, and next thing they know, they're in violation of the Clean Water Act, and they had no idea that they ever even tripped a wire. But there's still a great deal of ambiguity with the new rule, and I think it's going to require a lot more litigation, unfortunately, in order to bring about the type of certainty that farmers and landowners of all stripes are going to need moving into the future. But it is a big step forward. At least the Sackett ruling eliminated the significant nexus test, which was very subjective and arbitrary. Personally, I think we're going to have more clarity through litigation. And hopefully, in the coming years, we'll have more clarity, just like we've received a significant amount of clarity through the Sackett decision. It should be understood that agriculture is inherent to the greatness of America, in that if you can produce your own energy, if you can produce your own food and fiber and export it to the world, you're in a much more dominant position to influence things worldwide than if you cannot do that. The last thing we want to be is totally energy dependent upon the Middle East. The last thing we want to be is totally food dependent upon every other nation in the world. And so that's why agriculture policy is so critically important. That's where it weaves into national security and food security, and which is why it's really important for us to have a good, strong farm bill, which hopefully we'll be working on soon.
And as congressional leaders of the Western Caucus continue to make headway on WOTUS and the Farm Bill, another reoccurring challenge for rural Americans is the Endangered Species Act. And for the last 50 years, while its primary purpose has been to protect and recover threatened and endangered animals, it has indirectly created burdensome and often unnecessary land use restrictions that can come at a hefty cost to private landowners. Now, members of the Western Caucus are working to strike a balance, seeking effective solutions to mitigate the impact of the Endangered Species Act regulations on ag land.
Proposed changes to the Endangered Species Act have ignited opposition from members of the Western Caucus. Now, with the resolution on the table, they're working to ensure that endangered species will be effectively managed, but without getting in the way of rural prosperity.
Every time you turn around, you're bumping into the Endangered Species Act. Whether it's for fish, or whether it's for wolves, or whether it's for grizzly bears, or whether it's for frogs. Every time you turn around, and that is being used as a weapon by many environmental organizations to stop people from irrigating, to stop people from doing things that we've done literally for years, running cattle, for example. So what we're going to be trying to do, and we've already formed up a group with Dan Newhouse's leadership to try to go back in and repair some of the more damaging elements to the Endangered Species Act. We're not trying to get rid of it. We're trying to make sure that it works. Because what you see is the act being brought into play at huge cost to neighborhoods and to communities, and no one talks about that. They talk about perhaps what it costs the agency to regulate, but never the consequences of regulation. So we'll be working on trying to address that issue.
How hard do you work on forming those relationships with the other side of the aisle, because you know how important it is for your constituents?
Right. Well, in order to reach across the aisle, someone's got to be reaching back. And I've found here that that's very rare. And I think it's because there's been a polarization of our parties. So for whatever reason, getting along doesn't really sell very well, certainly to the press. You don't get rewarded for trying to get along. That's not good, I'll just tell you that. But that's kind of the way it is. So what we're trying to do is make sure when we come up with a solution, we show how it works for the broadest scope of people and the broadest area. You do your best. This is where you make these kind of changes, and if you do it right, they'll stick.
Coming up on Champions of Rural America, you don't often see Western wear in Washington, D.C., but cowboy attire was proudly on display at the 30th anniversary gala of the Western Caucus. We'll take you inside the event celebrating 30 years of serving as the voice of rural America next.
"30 years ago, members of Congress decided that they needed something more. People in rural America, particularly in the western United States, were struggling to get their voices heard in the halls of Congress. From those humble beginnings way back 30 years ago, it's grown to what it is today.
Western issues are so unique, from air, land, water, reservations for Native Americans, even our sports and culture make the West a unique place.
I'm working to bring Montana common sense to D.C. That's exactly what the Western Caucus does.
Western lands, our western states, our frontiers, it is what has made America so unique. It's a great part of our heritage, a great part of our spirit.
The issues that face us, the votes we take, all need special attention. The prevalence of federal land in the West gives our relationship to the federal government unique status as we address issues like WOTUS, HILT, oil and gas, and other developments on federal Western lands.
We had a very large stake in the ongoing debate about the waters of the United States. We can take a lot of credit for that moving it in the right direction.
Energy is foundational to everything we do. American energy is our future. American mining, American innovation, American processing and refining, American manufacturing, and American infrastructure will lead us out of this energy crisis.
Endangered Species Act, the Western Caucus will remain at the forefront of this effort. 3% success rate is failing our wildlife across this beautiful country. We can do so much better to recover our nation's magnificent flora and fauna.
Welcome back to Champions of Rural America. I'm Christina Loren. For the last 30 years, since its inception in 1993, the Western Caucus has steadily grown to 105 members, elevating the voice of rural America to a new high. This delegation packs a major punch on policy, as members hold a majority of the gavels in the House of Representatives. And we currently have more lawmakers advocating on behalf of the rural way of life in Congress than ever before. To commemorate the historic 30-year milestone, the organization celebrated with a gala in the nation's capital.
Attire that you'd see out here in downtown Washington, D.C. at the historic Warner Theater, but tonight it's cowboy black tie for the 30th annual Western Caucus Gala.
Can you believe it? 30 years of the Western Caucus. 30 years.
This is a unique organization of people who build America, who use responsibly the resources of this country to make America great.
Well, it's so nice to be with you again and to have you join us for this 30th anniversary gala of the Western Caucus.
Now the second largest caucus in D.C.
Well, when I came in 2009, we were among the smallest. We could meet in one tiny conference room. And going from that in 2009 to what's happening here tonight really is a tribute to everyone who's worked so hard to make Western issues front and center.
The people of the American West are the heartbeat of America. You are the heartbeat of America, and I want to thank you.
So many things we couldn't do without the Western Caucus Foundation. It promotes, it facilitates the Western Caucus ideals to other lawmakers for sure, to policy influencers, and certainly to the public. They're an education organization, but more than that, I think, a cultural exchange program, teaching coastal elites and city folk, our city cousins, about Western and rural America.
Congressional actions wouldn't happen without staff members, so we congratulate and thank the Western Caucus and their staffs in Washington for looking out for the needs of rural Americans for the last 30 years and into the future. With a total of 535 members of Congress, it can be difficult to form a personal connection to the major decision makers of the country. So we want to take some time and spotlight a Western Caucus member in each episode to give you a chance to see what drives their passion to look out for farmers and ranchers and all rural Americans in the highest levels of government. In this segment, we want to focus on Congressman Jim Baird, a businessman and veteran who serves as the U.S. representative from Indiana's 4th Congressional District.
Tell us a little bit about your background. I understand you went to Purdue University.
Yes, the master's was in swine or gestation management. Then I got drafted and I went to the military. Lost the arm in Vietnam. It was in more than one firefight. But you know, I'm not bitter about that because I learned a lot about myself. I learned what some folks spend a lifetime trying to figure out. I know what I am and what I will do and what I won't do.
Faith, family, and country, they seem to be the pillars in your life. And you live those out. You don't see that a lot in Washington, D.C., so thank you. And thank you for leading by example and for looking out for farmers and ranchers.
You bet. You bet. I'm proud of them.
It is so nice to know that we have lawmakers like Congressman Jim Baird in Washington, D.C., someone who cares deeply about agriculture, looking out for the interests of farmers, ranchers, and rural Americans in the nation's capital. Want to thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Champions of Rural America, brought to you by the Western Caucus Foundation. Be sure to join us next month as we take a deeper dive into proposed changes to the Endangered Species Act. It's coming up again, and how lawmakers plan to get in front of another round of ESA's potentially burdensome regulations. I'm Christina Loren. Thank you so much for joining us for Champions of Rural America. Blessings to you and those you love. We'll see you next time.